Welcome to our BACCF 2020 webinar, Investing in the US, Brazilian Tax Aspects to be Considered when Structuring Your Business, with our special guest, Ana Cláudia Ottumi. Thank you for everyone present here. Good afternoon. My name is Alexandre Piquet. I am the sitting president of the Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce of Florida. Welcome to our webinar on investing in the US. I'd like to pass the mic to our Vice President, Luiz Davi Azambuja, Executive Vice President and Chairman of the BACCF Banking and Finance Committee.
Thank you, Alexandre. Thank you all. Welcome to the seminar, and our thanks to the committee for their participation, and special thanks to the co-chairman, Mr. Edson Tamamaro of Tatsu Consultoria Empresarial, for organizing the event today. We also thank our partners, the Achei USA and Hyatrace. Our speaker today is Ana Cláudia Ottumi. Has more than 30 years of experience in the tax area. Ana Cláudia is a partner of Ottumi Advogados. She is also chair of the Brazilian branch of STEP, Society of Trust and State Practitioners, member of the Practice Council of NIU, New York University School of Law International Tax Program, board chair elected of the Financial Planning Standard Board, vice chair of the Women of IFA Network Global Committee, director of ADDF IFA Brazil, professor of tax at the LLM in International Taxation of Brazilian Institute of Tax Law, IBDT, and the University of Zurich, LLM in International Tax, guest lecture in post-graduation course. Also, we encourage all of you, if you are not a member of the Chamber, to join the BACCF and enjoy the many opportunities to promote your business. Here are some of the reasons: networking, referrals, business opportunity, visibility, credibility, and others, marketing tools, and committee participation. Our BACCF team would be delighted to schedule a meeting with you. Through the presentation, you are welcome to send your question via chat, and we will address them during the last 5 to 10 minutes. Please be sure to have your mic on mute, and if you are not speaking, if your video is on, remember that guests are looking at you. Thank you very much, and welcome, Ana Cláudia Ottumi.
Thank you, Luiz Davi. Thank you, Edson Tamamaro and Alexandre Piquet, for this opportunity. It is a great pleasure to be here with you again, online this time. But what is good from the online is how practical it is. So we can be anywhere in the world very easily. And I'm going to share here my presentation. And today we are going to address certain the Brazilian tax aspects of let's say the most common ways of investing in the US, and looking particularly at what are the possibilities and what are the tax implications, because as you know, it's not easy to navigate in taxes here in Brazil. So I'm going to share here my screen. It's not easy to navigate with taxes. Certain things that we are going to say normally does not make much sense for some US tax practitioners or US practitioners in general, but it has to do with what we have here in Brazil. And afterwards, I am going to make this presentation available to Brazilian American Chambers in such a way that this can be made available to the attendees as well. Okay, so we are going to speak here about what are the Brazilian tax aspects of direct investment via offshore companies, real estate investments in the US, and investments through trusts. Trust is a very is a structure that is commonly used in the US, but here in Brazil, we are going to see the problems that we may have by using trusts in investment structures here. And also, so we are going to start with a brief overview of the main what is the taxation of ordinary income and what is the taxation of capital gains, so that when we are going to see each of the alternatives, we have a better idea, we have more easy, it's easier for you to identify what is the applicable taxation. We have a worldwide taxation for both individuals and companies, and the general rule is that any income is subject to the individual income tax. The individual income tax that we call IRPF, this individual income tax has rates varying from 0 to 27.5, but the brackets are very low. So the amounts of these brackets here that you see are in Brazilian reais. So if you consider that the exchange rate now it's more than 5 reais per dollar, we are speaking about here monthly income of less than $1,000 to be in the top of the income taxation, in such a way that we normally refer to the individual income tax as the income tax at 27.5%, because in the end of the day, the progressive rates are, the brackets are so low that in the end, we end up using only the 27.5 in the end of the day. And when the difference between the ordinary income and capital gains that has a different taxation is that within the scope of capital gains, we have, of course, the alienation of assets, the transfer of assets, but we also have something that we don't have when we look at the internal and at the legislation for investments in Brazil, which is the inclusion of financial investments in the scope of capital gains, which makes a taxation of a foreign investment abroad more attractive than the taxation of a service income obtained abroad as well. So, and in addition to the financial investments, the expression that we have in Portuguese in the legislation is aplicação financeira, which means that it's the financial investments performed through financial institutions, not only a simple financial transaction. And also includes in the scope of capital gains, the taxation of foreign exchange variation. So if I invest in the US, $1,000 when the dollar was 2 reais, and now I have the same $1,000 worth in 5,000 reais, even though from a dollar perspective, my money is exactly the same, from a Brazilian perspective, the difference between the 2 and 5 in my example is taxable as capital gain. And unless I use proceeds generated outside Brazil to invest. So for example, I'm a professor at the University of Zurich. So when I get my payment from the University of Zurich, if instead of bringing the payment into Brazil, I use the payment to perform an investment in the US, for example, I'm entitled to exemption of foreign exchange variation because my money was generated outside Brazil. So there is this difference when we are dealing with investments outside Brazil. We need to care whether it's an investment performed with funds generated in Brazil or obtained outside Brazil. And the reason why the taxation of capital gains is more attractive is that the rates vary from 15 to 22.5, but you can see here that we have large brackets differently from income tax on ordinary income. The first bracket goes up to 5 million reais, so approximately $1 million. So the brackets here then it make a lot of difference, because you only reach the 22.5% when you have here more than 30 million reais of gains in a certain year. Okay. And we also have to care, and before going into each of the structures, we also have to care about the ancillary obligations. We have more ancillary obligations than any other country in the world in terms of of declaring assets. The minimum value to declare assets is very, very low. So all assets above 1.6K, and it's this low exactly, have to be included in the statement of assets. The statement of assets that is part of the annual income tax return. So we need to declare all our assets in Brazil or outside Brazil. It's not a declaration of only foreign assets, it's for any asset. And if I do not declare, this is considered as a tax evasion, and it's considered unjustified income. And if there is a tax assessment, the tax authorities will charge the 27.5 that we saw, plus a penalty of 150% plus interest. As the interest is now quite high, because it's the Selic rate is the basic interest. It's so these tax assessment can reach more than 60% of the overall amount that I did not declare. And besides, I have to declare the investments to the central bank, except if I have less than $1 million. And the declaration of assets is based on market value, which is different from tax, because for tax purpose, we declare at cost value as a matter in general. And a part of that, I have to consider that each time that I have income or gains outside Brazil, it's my own obligation to calculate and pay. So it's a self-assessment, and I have to pay until the last business day of the following month. So I don't have much time to pay, and also include in the annual income tax return. So this is to give just an overview of the ancillary obligations and the general rule for us to go through the structure per se. Going through the structures per se, the first situation is the investment directly in financial assets in the US. Currently, we have many Brazilians that invest directly in the US. Just as an idea, in the first year that Brazil received the information of FATCA, that was exactly the information on financial investments by Brazilian individuals in the US, Brazil received the information of about 25,000 bank accounts or bank and financial accounts. And from that time, 2015 on, the amount of accounts that is reported every year has grown. According to the tax authorities, has grown more than 20% per year. So we have more and more Brazilians investing directly. The advantage of investing directly in financial assets is that I can treat the financial income as capital gains. So I have, because I have a bracket of 5 million reais, in most cases, the taxation stays at 15%. And if I have any income tax paid in the US, which is not common, most of the investments that Brazilians perform in US financial markets are the ones that are exempt from withholding tax from non-US residents. But if I have any income tax paid in the US, it's creditable here in Brazil. The disadvantage is the necessity of having a strict control of everything, of each and every investment if I want to change the investment, if I'm investing in bonds and I want to exchange the bonds for shares, for example, in the stock markets, I need to pay taxes every time that I have, let's say, the liquidation of investment, an inflow of a coupon. So it's more complex because for those who have a portfolio of bonds, for example, every month there is credit of coupons, and then I need to check each of the coupons and pay taxes in every coupon that I receive every time that I change the financial investment. And besides, if I have any losses, I cannot offset the losses. So it's a more complex control in terms of, let's say, operationally speaking. Even though you don't have a structure, it's a more complex control. Then we have the situation of a Brazilian, which is also common, a Brazilian investing through an offshore company and holding a portfolio of investments in the US. In this situation, the advantage is what we call the portfolio effect, because they can possibly offset gains and losses. We do not have CFC, the Control Foreign Corporation rules, so I don't have to pay taxes in Brazil immediately. I have the taxation on a cash basis, which is upon distribution or use of profits. This point of use of profits is very important. Some of the families, they say, well, I'm not distributing the profits, but then they have a credit card paid by the offshore company, but then they are going to buy a masterpiece for their home, and they use the offshore company to pay for this art. They start using the offshore, the monies in the offshore company as if they were the money of their own pockets. And this is where tax contingencies may arise exactly for using the offshore company monies without any, let's say, without being careful about it. So, because each and every distribution of profits, even if it's indirect by use of profits, is taxable by individual income tax of 27%. Of course, that having an offshore company in comparison to a direct investment, I have the cost of compliance and maintenance of the company. And we are calling the attention for the importance of having a minimum substance of this company, because, well, the tax authorities, the tax laws, and the interpretations are evolving. So the substance has grown importance in everywhere in the world. Whether we say minimum substance is having a local director, not the director in Brazil, having the accounting books, the compliance work being performed in the jurisdiction, because we see many families with the directors being Brazilians, with all the accounting and all the controls being performed in Brazil. And there is a risk of the tax authorities say that this is a company incorporated outside Brazil, but domiciled in Brazil. To the extent that you have at least a minimum substance outside, and you care about the way that you use the money in the offshore companies, showing that it's a real investment and not just, let's say, a pocket, right pocket and left pocket of the same individual. If there is a discussion with the tax authorities, we have more strength to defend this deferral of taxation. And the disadvantage is that if I have an income tax paid in the US, because I have this offshore company, who will pay the US tax would be the offshore company. So I cannot use in the individual level this tax credit. But if I have an offshore company and investing, what if I want to use the proceeds of the offshore company. Can I use them? Yes, it is. Of course, that is possible to use, but I need some discipline. What we tell people is that when you are going to use, instead of simply making a transfer from the offshore company to the individual account, um, let's do formally a capital reduction instead of a distribution of profits. Because in a capital reduction, I have taxation on foreign exchange gains only, not on the principal in reais, but only on the foreign exchange gains. And if my investment in the offshore company was performed with monies obtained outside Brazil, I am exempt of these gains. But it's important to prepare the corporate documents to demonstrate the capital reduction. In most cases, families that want to have some cash available, like for travel, for credit, international credit card, what we recommend is to have to make 1 or 2 capital reductions per year, transfer the funds to an individual account with no remuneration, to not characterize a financial investment, just a simple cash account, and use in this cash account. And if I sell those shares of the offshore company, the applicable taxation will be as a capital gain. Okay. There is let's say a variance in this possibility of using U.S. company, offshore company to invest in the U.S. That is the offshore fund. So I have a fund structure in Cayman, I have offshore fund structure in the Bahamas, in Luxembourg. What is the difference? What is the difference? Can I invest in the US through a foreign investment fund? From a Brazilian tax perspective, the advantage of using a foreign investment fund is that I can qualify as a financial investment and have taxation of capital gains and have the portfolio effect. So from a tax perspective, it's more efficient because I'll be taxing as capital gain upon the redemption of quotas. But the problem is that I see many structures of fund that are too simple to be considered as fund. That's why I say that the offshore fund may qualify as a corporate participation or financial investment. It will qualify as a corporate participation if I don't have enough substance of fund. So if it's too simple, if it's a smart fund with no much structure, then the tax authorities, the Brazilian tax authorities may say that it's a simple offshore company and it will be taxable as ordinary income and not as a capital gains. To be considered as a financial investment, so as a real financial investment, this investment fund needs to be what I'm calling well-structured or robust, with professional management, NAV calculation, fund management, portfolio management, everything that custodial of assets and quotas. So it's an expensive structure. Yes, it is expensive structure. For you to have this kind of more robust structure, it will probably be not lower than $60,000-$70,000, at least $50,000 a year, in comparison with a structure of a simple offshore company that, with all the necessary compliance, let's say, with the local director, with bookkeeping performed outside Brazil, will be at maximum something around $4,000, with all this structure, against at least $50,000. So it's a much more expensive structure, but to be treated as a capital gain, to be taxed at a lower rate. So it's important to check the amounts involved in such a way that to worth the difference between 27.5 to 22.5 or even 15%, okay? And then we have here the real estate investments in the US. In the US, of course, that for liability purpose, I think it's almost a must to have the US LLC as the owner of the real estate property. And I see many Brazilians that just do the US LLC and hold to hold the real estate property, and they start to rent the property. So the US LLC starts to have profits in the US because the family uses the property once, twice a year, and all the during the other time it's rented. So it's generating income and generating profit. So because the US LLC, it's a disregarded entity, which means that for US purpose, if I'm going to ask the US IRS, well, this LLC had 100,000 of profits. If I ask the IRS, who's the owner of this profit? The IRS will say, it's the Brazilian shareholder, if I have the Brazilian individual, which means that the tax authorities here in Brazil can consider that the profits were distributed to the individual, even though they are not distributed in terms of cash transfer. And when we say available in Brazil, our tax codes say that it can be economically or from a legally available. And in this case, the profits would be legally available, which could attract the taxation here in Brazil. That's why we always recommend to have an offshore company as a blocker in such a way that I avoid the tax authorities to consider that there was an immediate distribution of the profits of this US LLC, and the US council will probably say that it's better because then when there is a succession, the succession occurs at the level of the offshore company and not of the US LLC. So I don't have a succession in the US. So this is a important point that I see many Brazilians investing directly in the real estate company. And before moving to the other point, I see here a question from Luis David, but I think we can pass through the questions afterwards, right? Just to make sure.
That's correct, Ana. That's correct.
Okay. Okay. Very good.
Just preparing the questions. Yes.
Okay. Very good. And then the last point here is the use of fiduciary structures. Even though trust is an important structure when you have U.S. tax residency, from a Brazilian tax purpose, it's not a tax planning because we don't have the concept of fiduciary ownership in the Brazilian law, except in certain credit transactions, but it's the opposite of a real trust structure here. We have a law project in our Congress to create trust in Brazil, to create the fiducia here in Brazil. We do not know when it will be approved to become a law. In the meantime, because we don't have a trust structure in Brazil, we have no clarity in the law. So when we had the amnesty in 1617, the tax authorities, they said that trust was a mere intermediary, not the owner of the assets. So was saying, so you declare if you have a company under a trust, you declare the company and you say that there is an intermediary, that is the trustee. But more recently, the tax authorities, in response to consultation, they started saying that all distributions by trust are taxable as ordinary income. So there is a confusion in the law in relation to that. So what is, let's say, the position that prevails in the market is that if I have a revocable trust, we are considering that the assets still belong to the settlor. So I continue to declare the assets as my assets in the statement, in the income tax return, nothing changes. And then if I have any distribution, I'm going to analyze if the distribution is income or profits and tax accordingly. If it's irrevocable trust, then there is a disposition of assets. Then I have to pay state gift tax, and there is a risk of the tax authorities understanding that it's subject to withholding tax because the tax authorities say that donations involving a non-resident person is subject to withholding tax. It doesn't make much sense, but the tax authorities have issued a consultation answering that. And in this case, I have the exclusion of the assets from the income tax return in such a way that all the distributions are treated as ordinary income. When we have to do with revocable trust, or sometimes when we do revocable trusts, we normally use a corporate settlor structure in such a way that I transfer the assets to a company as a capital contribution, and the company is the corporate settlor in such a way that it's not the Brazilian individual setting up the trust, but rather this corporate settlor, and exactly to avoid these discussions that we have here, especially in the irrevocable trust. So this is just an overview, and I thank you for your attention and pass the floor back to Luiz David. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ana Cláudia. It's my immense pleasure to thank you for addressing the BACCF members and to congratulate you for the wealth of information shared. I would like to open the floor to questions and answer. We have between 5 and 10 minutes to ask any questions to Ana Cláudia, please. You can write on the chat. Oh, I think the first question that we have is like when you set up an offshore, Ana Cláudia, normally everybody set up in a $50,000 nominal and $1 each share. It's a nominal value of 50,000. Normally they open this way. Now let's suppose that the executive, the businessman in Brazil, he sent $2 million outside, but the offshore has 50,000. How are you going to classify the offshore in terms of to be correct with the Banco Central and to the Receita Federal in Brazil?
In this case, well, one important point is that the offshore, the nominal value of the share for us to have up to 50,000 shares, it doesn't have to be necessarily $1. You can have shares with a. We had situations in which you keep the 50,000 shares with a value above $1, for example. This is not common, but it's doable. And we normally, if we want to keep the nominal share capital at $50,000, then the excess to 2 million we normally register as a capital surplus, as a capital reserve in the accounting books, in such a way that it's part of the net equity of the company. It's part of the net equity. For a Brazilian tax perspective, my cost of investment is the Brazilian, let's say, amount spent to acquire this $2 million. So because I have to declare the amounts in Brazilian reais, and it is possible to have not to do a capital contribution, but rather a loan But I personally do not like to have loans in which you know that the likelihood of being paid is in the short term is low, because the tax authorities, they understand that if you have a loan that is open for a long time, they may regard the loan as a income to the debtor, and in this case, to an income to the offshore company, which would attract the withholding tax of 25%. So I prefer to book this difference as a capital surplus, capital reserve.
On the balance sheet, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
On the part of the capital, not the assets, not the liability. The net worth, you put the capital 50,000 and the capital surplus. How
Yes, capital surplus or capital reserve.
Okay, perfect. On the balance sheet, that and you declare the amount of 2 million to central bank.
That's correct. That's correct.
Perfect. Yeah. Do you have any other question? Mary, Larissa, do you see any other questions on the chat?
Yes. I think Fernanda wants to make a question.
Let me open her mic just a second.
Hi, Ana Cláudia.
Hi, Fernanda.
Thank you so much for your presentation. My question is not related to taxation specifically, but so related to offshore, because we have a real case that's happening now, and it's kind of sometimes difficult to deal with. In an offshore company where you have a sole member, a sole director, and one reserve director, okay? In this case, the sole shareholder and member has passed away, and also the reserve director. So how does this work in the practical manner? How do we start a probate? I mean, how can we deal with this situation? It's kind of hard. I don't know.
Yes, it is hard. It is hard, but anyway, it will be necessary to start a probate in the jurisdiction, and also to have to appoint a new director in such a way that the company can continue to perform whatever it's necessary, like investments or whatever it's necessary, but it's necessary. And I think because of your question reminded me another point, that even though trust is not something that is very friendly to Brazilians, because Brazilians have so much the sense of ownership, the importance of ownership, and trust is exactly you transferring the ownership to someone else. When we have an offshore company, it's important at least to have a will drafted in the jurisdiction in such a way that the succession of the shares of the company, the succession is much easier, because in the will I have exactly already the information of who are the heirs and so on, and in such a way that the succession can be much smoother than in a situation that you don't have a will in the jurisdiction, and then you need to demonstrate who are the heirs. Normally, a judge of the jurisdiction may want to wait for the end of the succession in Brazil to apply the same rules there. So it's always useful to have to have a will drafted in the jurisdiction if there is no structure of trust or something like that.
But let me ask you something. In the meantime, while the probate doesn't start, and we don't have any director or any shareholder. The company is frozen, basically. We cannot, there's nothing can be done.
But then during the probate phase, you have to you can appoint, let's say, the heirs appoint a new director as the shareholders.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Okay,
think
thank you so much.
this is a case study that's very important. This is a real case, and I believe that is when we, the officers of the clients, we see a standing offshore. It is better to talk to the client, bring a lawyer, and explain the advantage of the financial planning to plan on the succession. This is where come Ana Cláudia. He can explain the advantage of the trust of the foundation, but in advance to avoid this case that Fernanda Costa is bringing right now. So we, the officers, when we open an account, it's very important to check and talk to the client, educate the client to do the financial planning for his succession. It's very important before, and now we have a case of Fernanda. She has to wait for the Brazilian court to appoint somebody, to transfer to abroad, to unlock the account that's completely frozen. So this is a very important issue, and thank you, Fernanda, for bringing in. Thank you, Ana Cláudia, for your comments. Do you have any another question? Mr. Viquet.
All right, very, very well. Yes, there are many ramifications for this subject. It is a very interesting subject, very present on our daily lives as attorneys that deal with transnational business and commercial relationship between Brazil and US. Thank you, Dr. Ana Cláudia Utumi. Impressive resume and even more impressive presentation, simplifying what for many others might seem like a headache or a more complicated matter. You presented in a very uncomplicated and easy to understand presentation. Thank you very much. Thanks again, Luiz Davi, for putting this together. Edson Tamamaro, Mary and Larissa are always in the background, but are the ones that pull the strings so everything can happen on a timely manner.
That's
and
correct.
I think we are on schedule to adjourn. I don't know if Dr. Utumi wants to say a few words before we close.
Well, just thank this opportunity and thank you all for the attention. Thank you.
Everybody that join us on this event, Zoom webinar, please send your questions to Ana Cláudia Utumi. We are going to coordinate with her for her to answer you back. Thank you very much. And the Bank and Finance Committee is very active, and we will look forward to welcome you for additional events. Please visit our website, and good afternoon, and thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Big smile for our screenshot, please. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Ciao. Ciao.